The thunder of hooves echoed across the Montana plains as Lila Vaughn clutched her 6-month-old daughter to her breast, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face. The year was 1878, and she had just witnessed her husband's murder at the hands of the 3 men now pursuing her. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she urged her exhausted mare forward, knowing the horse couldn't maintain this pace much longer. Isaac Holbrook adjusted the wide brim of his Stetson against the afternoon sun, his keen eyes narrowing at the distant sound of galloping horses. Standing on the ridge overlooking Whispering Creek, he instinctively reached for the Winchester rifle strapped to his saddle. At 32, the former cavalry soldier had seen enough trouble to recognize its approach. He mounted his stallion with practiced ease and headed toward the commotion, his weathered hand resting on his holstered Colt. Lila's horse stumbled, nearly sending her and little Emma tumbling to the ground. She managed to steady herself but knew her time was running out. The 3 riders were gaining ground rapidly. The leader, a man with a scar running down his left cheek whom she knew as Reeves, shouted something to the others. Lila clutched Emma tighter as she urged her exhausted horse onward. "Just a little further, girl," she whispered to the mare, though she had no destination in mind except away from these men who had destroyed her life in a matter of minutes. Isaac crested the hill and immediately assessed the situation below. A young woman on a failing horse, clutching someone to her chest, with 3 rough-looking men in pursuit. His jaw tightened as he recognized the riders. The Blackwell Gang had been terrorizing settlements across the territory for months, and now they were hunting a woman and what appeared to be a child. He nudged his horse into a gallop, calculating distances and angles in his mind. The woman wouldn't make it much farther, her horse was spent, and the gang was closing in fast. Isaac would have one chance to intervene, and it would need to be perfectly timed. Lila's mare finally gave out, collapsing beneath her. She managed to roll free, protecting Emma from the impact as she tumbled across the prairie grass. The baby wailed in terror as Lila scrambled to her feet, her dress torn and her auburn hair falling loose from its pins. "Nowhere to run now, Mrs. Vaughn," Reeves called out, his voice carrying across the open space as the 3 men circled her on horseback. "Hand over the brat, and we might let you live." "Never," Lila spat, backing away while keeping Emma tight against her chest. "You've already taken my Thomas. You'll not take my daughter." The second rider, a man with a patchy beard and rotting teeth, laughed cruelly. "Boss wants to make sure there ain't no witnesses, madam, even little ones, nothing personal." "You tell your boss that Thomas never had his money," Lila said, desperation making her voice quaver. "He was innocent." "Too late for that," Reeves said, dismounting and approaching her slowly. "The boss don't take chances." From his position along the ridge, Isaac could see the confrontation unfolding. He couldn't hear the exchange, but the woman's protective stance told him everything he needed to know. He guided his horse down the slope, keeping to the cover of scattered cottonwoods as he approached. Reeves grabbed for the baby, but Lila turned away, using her body as a shield. "Take my life if you must, but please, I beg you, spare my daughter." "Got no choice," Reeves growled, nodding to his companions. "Jeb, take the kid." The third man, silent until now, dismounted and drew a length of rope from his saddlebag. "I got a better idea," he said, fashioning a crude lasso. "Let's have some fun with this." Before Lila could react, Jeb snatched Emma from her arms while Reeves held her back. She screamed and fought like a wildcat, but a swift blow to her temple left her dazed on the ground, reaching helplessly toward her child. "No, Emma, please," she sobbed as Jeb tied the rope around the wailing infant's swaddling clothes. Let's see how high this little end can fly, Jeb sneered, remounting his horse with the end of the rope secured to his saddle horn. The other end dangled Emma precariously a few feet above the ground as the outlaw prepared to ride off with his horrifying trophy. Isaac had seen enough. He slid from his horse, dropping to one knee and raising his Winchester in a single fluid motion. Time seemed to slow as he steadied his breath, calculating for wind and distance. The outlaw had started to move, the rope pulling taut, lifting the screaming infant higher from the ground. The crack of Isaac's rifle split the air. His bullet severed the rope cleanly, just as the outlaw spurred his horse into a gallop. The baby began to fall, and Isaac was already moving, racing across the open ground with the speed and determination of a man possessed. He slid beneath the falling infant like a baseball player stealing home, catching Emma securely in his outstretched arms just before she would have hit the ground. The momentum carried him rolling across the grass, his body curled protectively around the child. The outlaws, momentarily stunned by the unexpected intervention, recovered quickly. Reeves drew his pistol, firing wildly in Isaac's direction as the former soldier scrambled behind the cover of a large boulder, still clutching the now screaming infant. "Who the hell are you?" Reeves shouted, sending another bullet ricocheting off the rock. Isaac didn't answer. He carefully placed the baby in a protected hollow beneath the boulder and drew his Colt. 3 against 1 weren't ideal odds, but he'd faced worse during the war. Lila, recovering from the blow to her head, saw her chance. While the outlaw's attention was fixed on the stranger who had saved her baby, she crawled toward the nearest horse, Jeb's mount, which was now skittish from the gunfire. With a strength born of maternal desperation, she pulled herself up and kicked the horse into motion, racing toward the boulder where her daughter was hidden. Bullets kicked up dirt around her as she rode, but she didn't slow. Reaching the boulder, she slid from the horse and found her baby and the stranger who had performed the impossible shot. "My daughter," she gasped, tears of relief streaming down her face as she reached for Emma. Isaac handed the infant over without hesitation, then turned his attention back to the outlaws. "Stay down," he instructed Lila. "This isn't over yet." "3 of them. 1 of you," Lila whispered, clutching Emma to her chest. "Those aren't good odds, mister." A grim smile crossed Isaac's face. "I've had worse." He fired 2 quick shots around the edge of the boulder, forcing the outlaws to scatter. "I'm Isaac Holbrook. Got a ranch about 5 miles east of here." "Lila Vaughn," she replied, her voice steadier now that Emma was safe in her arms. "They killed my husband this morning. Said he owed their boss money." "The Blackwell Gang," Isaac confirmed, peering cautiously around the edge of their shelter. "They've been causing trouble all over the territory." Reeves's voice carried across the open space. "Hey, hero, we don't want the woman, just the kid. Hand her over and you can both ride away." "You're not getting either of them," Isaac called back, reloading his Colt with practiced efficiency. To Lila, he murmured, "When I give the signal, get on that horse and ride hard for those trees to the east. Don't look back." "What about you?" Lila asked, her green eyes wide with concern for this stranger who had risked his life for her daughter. "I'll be right behind you," Isaac promised, though they both knew it would be nearly impossible for him to hold off 3 gunmen and escape. Lila shook her head. "I won't leave you to die for us. Give me your pistol, I can shoot." Isaac raised an eyebrow in surprise but didn't argue. He handed her his spare revolver from his boot. "You know how to use this?" "My father taught me," she replied, checking the chamber with confident movements. Thomas never approved, but I kept practicing anyway. A new respect flickered in Isaac's eyes. All right then, new plan. On my count, we both make a run for it. You take the horse, I'll provide cover, then jump on behind you. Lila nodded, shifting Emma to one arm while keeping the pistol ready in her free hand. The baby had quieted somewhat, exhausted from her ordeal, and nestled against her mother's shoulder. 1, 2, 3. Isaac burst from behind the boulder, firing rapidly at the outlaws, forcing them to duck for cover. Lila mounted the horse in one smooth motion, holding Emma securely as she did so. Isaac continued firing, backing toward the horse as Lila urged it closer to him. A bullet grazed his arm, tearing through his shirt sleeve and drawing blood, but he barely flinched. With one final shot, he turned and leapt onto the horse behind Lila, wrapping one arm around her waist as she spurred the animal forward. The horse bolted across the open prairie toward the tree line, carrying its triple burden with determined strides. Bullets whistled past them, but the increasing distance made accuracy difficult for their pursuers. "They'll follow," Isaac said close to Lila's ear as they entered the relative safety of the trees. "We need to keep moving," Lila nodded, her body tense against his. "Where are we going?" "My ranch. It's defensible, and I've got men there who can help." They rode hard through the forest, Isaac guiding their course while keeping watch for signs of pursuit. Emma, remarkably, had fallen asleep against her mother's chest, the rhythmic motion of the horse soothing her after the trauma. As they traveled, Lila's thoughts raced. In the span of a single day, she had lost her husband, nearly lost her daughter, and now found herself dependent on the protection of a stranger. A handsome stranger, with steady hands and eyes that seemed to see everything, but a stranger nonetheless. "Thank you," she said softly as they forded a shallow creek, the horse picking its way carefully across the rocky bottom. "What you did, catching Emma like that, I've never seen anything like it." Isaac shrugged, wincing slightly as the movement aggravated his wounded arm. "Right place, right time. And the shot to cut the rope? Was that also just luck?" Lila pressed, glancing over her shoulder at him. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "That was skill, madam. Spent 4 years as a sharpshooter in the cavalry." "The war?" Isaac nodded. "And after?" "Frontier duty until 74. They fell silent again, each lost in thought as the horse carried them deeper into the forest. Lila was acutely aware of Isaac's arm around her waist, the solid warmth of his chest against her back. It had been so long since she'd been this close to anyone but Thomas and Emma. The thought of her husband brought fresh pain. They hadn't been deeply in love. Their marriage more one of convenience and mutual respect, but he'd been a good man who didn't deserve his fate. As the sun began to set, the forest thinned, revealing a valley below with a modest ranch house and several outbuildings. A corral held a dozen horses, and smoke curled from the chimney of the main house. "Holbrook Ranch," Isaac announced, guiding their mount down the slope. "Not much, but it's home." "It's beautiful," Lila said honestly, taking in the peaceful scene. After the chaos of the day, the ranch seemed like a haven of tranquility. As they approached the main house, 2 men emerged from the barn, rifles at the ready until they recognized Isaac. "Boss, we were getting worried," called the older of the 2, a weather-beaten man with a gray-streaked beard. His eyes widened at the sight of Lila and the baby. "Got company, I see." "Trouble, Frank," Isaac replied as he dismounted, then reached up to help Lila down. "The Blackwell Gang. They'll be coming this way." Frank's expression darkened. "Been waiting for those bastards to show up." He nodded respectfully to Lila. "Madam, this is Lila Vaughn and her daughter, Emma," Isaac introduced them. "They need our protection. Mrs. Vaughn, this is Frank Miller, my foreman, and Caleb Porter, one of my hands." The younger man, Caleb, tipped his hat to Lila. "Madam, let's get inside," Isaac said, glancing at the darkening sky. "I'll explain everything, and we need to prepare for visitors." Frank nodded, taking the reins of their horse. "I'll see to the animal. Caleb, alert the others." Isaac guided Lila toward the house, his hand resting lightly on her back. The simple gesture provided unexpected comfort, and she leaned slightly into his touch, Emma still sleeping in her arms. The ranch house was modest but well kept, with a large central room combining kitchen and living areas. A fire burned in the stone hearth, warming the space against the evening chill. Simple furnishings, a wooden table with chairs, a sofa covered in a homespun blanket, shelves lined with books gave the room a lived-in feel. "You can rest here," Isaac said, indicating the sofa. "Are you hungry?" The mention of food made Lila realize she hadn't eaten since dawn. "Yes, thank you. I'll see what Ellie's left for supper. She's our cook, comes up from town most days." While Isaac busied himself at the stove, Lila settled on the sofa, arranging Emma comfortably beside her. The baby stirred but didn't wake, her tiny face peaceful in sleep. "Your daughter's beautiful," Isaac commented, returning with 2 plates of stew and placing them on the table. "How old is she?" 6 months, Lila replied, carefully lifting Emma and moving to the table. She's usually not so quiet around strangers. "She's had quite a day," Isaac said, his expression softening as he looked at the sleeping infant. "You both have." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the events of the day catching up with Lila as exhaustion settled into her bones. She found herself studying Isaac, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar, the strong line of his jaw beneath a day's growth of beard, the careful way he held his injured arm. "You're hurt," she said suddenly, noticing the bloodstain on his sleeve had grown larger. Isaac glanced at his arm as if noticing the wound for the first time. "It's just a graze." "Let me see," Lila insisted, rising from her chair with Emma cradled in one arm. "Where do you keep your medical supplies?" Isaac looked like he might argue, but instead pointed to a cabinet near the fireplace. "There's a box in there." Lila found the wooden box containing basic medical supplies and returned to the table. "Hold her," she said, carefully transferring Emma to Isaac's uninjured arm. He looked momentarily panicked, but adjusted quickly, cradling the baby with surprising gentleness. Emma stirred, her eyes fluttering open to gaze solemnly at the stranger holding her. Instead of crying, she simply yawned and settled back to sleep against his chest. "She likes you," Lila observed as she cut away Isaac's shirt sleeve to expose the wound. The bullet had indeed just grazed him, leaving a furrow about 3 inches long in the muscle of his upper arm. It was still bleeding slowly. "It needs cleaning," she said, reaching for the bottle of whiskey Isaac kept with the medical supplies. "This will sting." Isaac didn't flinch as she poured the alcohol over the wound, though she saw his jaw tighten slightly. Emma remained peacefully asleep against him, untroubled by the momentary tension in his body. "You're good at this," Isaac commented as Lila efficiently bandaged his arm. "Were you a nurse during the war?" Lila shook her head. "I was too young, only 13, when it ended. But after I helped the doctor in our town. Thomas was his assistant before we married." "Your husband was a doctor?" "Almost. He was studying medicine when we met. We were supposed to go back east next spring so he could finish his training." The reality of Thomas's death hit her anew, and Lila's hands faltered in their work. Isaac's free hand covered hers briefly. "I'm sorry about your husband." Lila nodded, blinking back tears as she secured the bandage. Thank you. He was a good man. He didn't deserve what happened to him. Few do, Isaac said quietly, his eyes distant for a moment before returning to her face. What will you do now? The question caught Lila off guard. In the chaos of the day, she hadn't thought beyond immediate survival. I don't know, she admitted. We had a small homestead near Billings, but after today I can't go back there. You're welcome to stay here until you figure things out, Isaac offered, carefully handing Emma back to her. It's not much, but you'll be safe. Thank you, Lila said sincerely, taking her daughter and settling her in the crook of her arm. But I can't impose on your kindness indefinitely. I'll need to find work, make a new start somewhere. Before Isaac could respond, the door opened, and Frank entered, stomping snow from his boots. No sign of them yet, but Caleb spotted tracks about a mile back. They're being cautious, circling around. Isaac nodded, rising from his chair. How many men do we have? 5 total, counting you and me, Frank replied, hanging his coat by the door. I've put Caleb and the Jenkins boys on watch. We've got all approaches covered. Good. We'll take shifts through the night. I don't think they'll risk an attack in the dark, but I don't want to be surprised. Frank's eyes moved to Lila and Emma. The lady and the little one can use your room, boss. It's the most protected, being at the back of the house. Isaac nodded in agreement. I'll show you, he said to Lila, leading her down a short hallway to a room at the rear of the house. The bedroom was simply furnished with a sturdy oak bed, a chest of drawers, and a small writing desk beneath the window. A quilt in rich blues and browns covered the bed, and a kerosene lamp on the bedside table cast a warm glow. You'll be comfortable here, Isaac said, remaining in the doorway as Lila entered the room. There's a washroom across the hall if you need it. Thank you, Lila said, turning to face him. For everything. Isaac nodded, a small smile softening his features. Get some rest, Mrs. Vaughn. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. Lila, she corrected him, after what you've done for us today, I think we're well past formalities. Lila, he repeated, her name sounding different in his deep voice. Good night. After he left, Lila sat on the edge of the bed, still holding Emma close. For the first time since the attack, she allowed herself to fully process the day's events. Thomas was gone. Their home was no longer safe. She was alone in the world with an infant daughter and men who wanted them dead. No, not entirely alone, she corrected herself. Isaac Holbrook had proven himself to be a man of extraordinary courage and skill. The memory of him racing across the prairie to catch Emma in midair still seemed impossible, like something from a dime novel rather than real life. Emma stirred against her, making small noises that indicated she was waking and would soon be hungry. Lila shifted her position to nurse her daughter, marveling at how the baby had slept through so much chaos. As Emma fed, Lila found her thoughts drifting back to Isaac, the careful way he had held her daughter, the calm competence with which he faced danger, the kindness in his eyes when he offered them shelter. She pushed those thoughts aside. Her husband was barely cold, and here she was noticing another man's eyes. Grief and exhaustion were making her mind wander inappropriately. What she needed was sleep, not romantic fancies about a man who was simply doing the decent thing by helping a woman and child in distress. Yet, as she settled into the bed with Emma beside her, Lila couldn't help wondering what kind of life Isaac Holbrook led here on his ranch. A man like him would surely have a wife, yet there had been no sign of a woman's touch in the house, no mention of family. Perhaps he was a widower, or simply devoted to his work. These questions followed her into uneasy dreams where Thomas's face blurred with Isaac's, and the sound of gunfire mingled with Emma's cries. Dawn came early, filtered through the curtains in pale golden light. Lila woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day crashed back into her consciousness. Emma was still asleep beside her, one tiny fist curled against her cheek. The smell of coffee and bacon drifted under the door, reminding Lila that she had eaten little the day before. She rose carefully, not wanting to wake Emma, and used the washroom to freshen up as best she could in her travel-stained clothes. When she entered the main room, Isaac was at the stove, his back to her as he tended to breakfast. The domesticity of the scene struck her. This dangerous man who had shot a rope from 50 yards and caught her falling child now stood flipping bacon in a cast-iron pan, seemingly at ease. "Good morning," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. Isaac turned, a small smile lifting the corner of his mouth. "Morning, coffee." "Please." Lila accepted the mug he offered, wrapping her hands around its warmth. "Any trouble in the night?" Isaac shook his head. "Nothing yet. Frank spotted their campfire about 2 miles out around midnight. They're watching us, trying to decide their next move." "Why not just leave? Surely we're not worth this much trouble to them." Isaac's expression darkened. "It's not about worth anymore. It's about pride. Reeves won't let a woman and a cowboy make fools of him and his men. Not if he wants to keep his reputation. So they'll wait until they have the advantage, then attack?" "That would be my guess." Isaac placed a plate of eggs and bacon on the table for her. "Eat. You'll need your strength." Lila sat, suddenly ravenous. "What's the plan?" "I've sent Caleb to fetch the marshal from Silver Creek. Should be back by nightfall, assuming he doesn't run into trouble. And until then, we wait. Keep watch. Prepare for the worst while hoping for the best." Isaac poured himself more coffee. "How's your little one this morning?" "Still sleeping. She usually wakes with the sun, but yesterday was exhausting for her." A comfortable silence fell between them as Lila ate, broken only by the distant sounds of ranch work horses nickering, men calling to each other as they went about their morning chores. It felt almost normal, as if she were a guest rather than a fugitive. "Tell me about your ranch," Lila said, pushing her empty plate away. "How long have you been here?" Isaac leaned against the counter, cradling his coffee mug. 4 years. Bought it with my army savings and a small inheritance from my uncle. It was hardly more than a shack and a few acres of grazing land then." "You've done well with it," Lila observed. "It feels like a home." Something flickered in Isaac's eyes, pleasure at the compliment, perhaps, or was memory. "It's getting there. Still plenty of work to be done." "No wife to help with that work?" Lila asked, immediately regretting the directness of the question. "I'm sorry, that's too personal." "It's all right," Isaac said, refilling her coffee. "There was someone once, back east, before the war, Eliza Porter. We were engaged when I enlisted." "What happened?" "She married my best friend while I was fighting at Antietam," Isaac said, his voice matter-of-fact rather than bitter. "Can't blame her. 3 years is a long time to wait, especially when you're receiving letters from another man telling you I'd likely not survive." "Your best friend wrote to her." "We all wrote to her. James just wrote more convincingly, it seems." Isaac shrugged. "It was a long time ago." "And since then?" "Since then, I've been focused on building this place." Isaac gestured around them. "Not much time for courting when you're establishing a ranch from nothing." Before Lila could respond, Emma's cries echoed from the bedroom. "Excuse me," she said, rising to tend to her daughter. When she returned with Emma freshly changed and alert, Isaac was studying a map spread on the table. He looked up as they entered, his serious expression softening at the sight of the baby. "She's much livelier this morning," he observed as Emma squirmed in Lila's arms, looking curiously around the unfamiliar room. "Yes, and hungry again," Lila said, settling in a chair by the fire to nurse her. She arranged a blanket for modesty, though Isaac had already returned his attention to the map. "I've been thinking," he said after a moment, "once the marshal arrives, you'll need somewhere safe to go while we deal with Reeves and his men." Lila tensed. "You want us to leave?" "Just temporarily," Isaac assured her. "There's a mission about 20 miles north of here, run by Franciscan sisters. They take in women and children who need sanctuary. You'd be safe there until this is resolved." "And then what?" Lila asked, the reality of her situation pressing in on her again. "I have no home to return to, no family nearby." Isaac looked up from the map, his blue eyes meeting hers. "One problem at a time. First, we make sure you and Emma are safe from the Blackwell Gang. Then, we figure out what comes next." There was something in his gaze, a promise, perhaps, or at least a genuine concern that reassured Lila more than his words. She nodded, accepting the wisdom of his plan, even as she felt a strange reluctance at the thought of leaving the ranch. Their conversation was interrupted by Frank bursting through the door, his expression grim. "Riders comin', 6 of them. Reeves brought reinforcements." Isaac was immediately alert, moving to the window to assess the approaching threat. "Where are our men?" "Jenkins' boys are in the barn with rifles. Caleb's not back yet." "So it's 3 against 6, Isaac calculated, his mind already working through scenarios. "They'll try to burn us out if they can't get a clean shot." Lila finished nursing Emma and readjusted her clothing, fear churning in her stomach. "What can I do?" Isaac turned to her, his expression grave. "Take Emma to the cellar. There's a trap door beneath the rug in my room. It's stocked with water and some provisions. Stay there until one of us comes for you." "And if none of you can come?" Lila asked, voicing the fear they all felt. "There's a tunnel that leads to the creek bed about 100 yards east. Follow it downstream until you reach the forest, then head north. You'll find the mission I told you about." Frank handed her a loaded revolver. "Just in case, madam." Lila took the weapon, tucking it into the pocket of her skirt. "I'd rather help you fight." Isaac shook his head firmly. "Your daughter needs you alive. This isn't your battle." "They're coming because of us," Lila argued. "They're coming because they're outlaws who can't stand being bested," Isaac countered. "Please, Lila, go to the cellar." Something in his tone urgency mixed with genuine concern made Lila acquiesce. She gathered Emma close and headed for Isaac's bedroom, her heart pounding with fear not for herself, but for the men who were risking their lives to protect her and her child. The trap door was well concealed beneath a braided rug, just as Isaac had said. Lila descended the narrow wooden steps into darkness, feeling along the wall until she found a lantern and matches. The small flame revealed a modest space with a cot, shelves stocked with canned goods and water barrels, and a narrow tunnel leading away from the house. Above her, she could hear the muffled sounds of men preparing for battle furniture being moved to create barricades, rifles being checked and loaded, low voices discussing strategy. Lila sat on the cot, Emma cradled against her chest, and waited. The first shots came within minutes distant at first, then closer as the attackers approached the house. Emma startled at the noise, her face screwing up in preparation to cry. Lila rocked her, singing softly to mask the sounds of gunfire and shouting that filtered down from above. Time stretched endlessly in the cellar, Without sunlight or a clock, Lila couldn't tell if hours or minutes had passed. Emma eventually fell asleep despite the commotion, exhausted from the stress and disruption to her routine. Suddenly, a new sound penetrated Lila's awareness, the crackle of flames. Smoke began to seep through the floorboards above, confirming her fears. The outlaws had indeed set fire to the house. Lila rose, strapping Emma to her chest with a shawl she found in the cellar, creating a makeshift carrier that would leave her hands free. She checked the revolver Frank had given her, ensuring it was loaded and ready. Then moved toward the tunnel entrance. She hesitated, torn between following Isaac's instructions to flee and her instinct to help the men fighting above. The decision was made for her as the trapdoor flew open, revealing Isaac's smoke-smudged face. "They've fired the north side of the house," he said, descending the steps quickly. "We need to move." "The others?" Lila asked, already gathering the few supplies she could carry. "Frank's hit, but he'll live. The Jenkins boys are holding the barn." Isaac checked his ammunition, his movements efficient despite the chaos around them. "Reeves brought more men than we expected. We're outnumbered." "The tunnel?" Lila suggested, gesturing to the dark passage. Isaac shook his head. "They'll expect that. We need to create a diversion, draw them away from the house so you and Emma can escape." "I won't leave you to die," Lila said firmly, meeting his gaze in the lantern light. Something flickered in Isaac's eyes, surprise perhaps or admiration. "I'm not planning to die today," he assured her, "but my priority is getting you and Emma to safety." Before Lila could respond, a crash sounded from above as part of the roof collapsed. Smoke poured more heavily through the floorboards, and Emma began to cough in her sleep. "No more time," Isaac decided. "Here's what we'll do." His plan was dangerous but simple. Isaac would create a diversion at the front of the property, drawing the outlaws' attention while Lila used the tunnel to escape with Emma. Once clear of the house, she would circle around to the eastern pasture where a horse would be waiting. One of the Jenkins boys would ensure it was there. She would ride for the mission while Isaac and his men dealt with Reeves. "What if they follow me?" Lila asked as they prepared to separate. "They won't," Isaac said with grim certainty. "I'll make sure of it." There was something in his tone that sent a chill through Lila, a cold determination that reminded her this man had been a soldier, a killer when necessary. He would do whatever it took to protect them, even at the cost of his own life. "Isaac," she began, then faltered, unsure what she wanted to say. Thank you seemed inadequate for all he had done and was still willing to do. He seemed to understand anyway. His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, the touch gentle despite the calluses on his fingers. "Go," he said softly. "I'll find you when this is over." It was a promise he might not be able to keep. They both knew that. But Lila nodded, holding on to the hope it offered. "We'll be waiting," she said, adjusting Emma more securely against her chest. Isaac checked his weapons one last time, then climbed the stairs to the trap door. He paused, looking back at Lila with an expression she couldn't quite read in the dim light. "Be safe," he said simply, then was gone, closing the door behind him. Lila gave him a few minutes' head start, then entered the tunnel, lantern held high to illuminate the narrow passage. The earthen walls pressed close on either side, supported by timber bracing every few feet. The air was stale but breathable, growing fresher as she moved further from the burning house. Emma remained mercifully asleep, her small weight a comfort against Lila's chest as she navigated the dark tunnel. The passage seemed to go on forever, twisting slightly to follow the natural contours of the land. Finally, after what felt like hours but was likely only 20 minutes, Lila saw a glimmer of daylight ahead. The tunnel emerged, as Isaac had said, in the dry creek bed east of the ranch house. Lila extinguished the lantern and cautiously peered out. The sounds of gunfire and shouting came from the direction of the ranch, but the immediate area seemed clear. Smoke billowed into the sky from the burning house, a stark reminder of what was at stake. Staying low, Lila made her way along the creek bed, following it until she could safely climb the bank and cut across to the eastern pasture. The horse was there as promised, a sturdy bay mare with a saddle already in place. Lila approached slowly, not wanting to startle the animal, and was relieved when the mare remained calm, accepting her touch without fear. Mounting while keeping Emma secure was a challenge, but Lila managed it, settling into the saddle and adjusting her daughter against her. The revolver pressed reassuringly against her hip as she urged the horse forward, keeping to the tree line for cover as she circled wide around the ranch. From her vantage point on the ridge, Lila could see the battle unfolding below. The main house was engulfed in flames, but the barn still stood, with occasional muzzle flashes visible from its upper windows. Several bodies lay motionless in the yard, outlaws, she hoped, rather than Isaac's men. Movement caught her eye, Isaac himself, raising from the burning house to a position behind the corral, drawing fire as he went. The diversion was working. The outlaw's attention was fixed on him rather than searching for her. Even from a distance, Lila could see the determination in his stance, the lethal precision of his return fire. She should ride away now, she knew that. Every moment she lingered increased the risk of discovery. But something held her in place, watching the man who had saved Emma's life at such great cost to himself. A flicker of movement to Isaac's left caught Lila's attention, an outlaw circling around the windmill, clearly intending to flank him. Isaac hadn't seen the threat, his attention focused on the men in front of him. Without conscious thought, Lila raised the revolver. The distance was great for a handgun, but her father had taught her well. She steadied her breathing, braced the weapon with both hands, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the valley. The outlaw stumbled, clutching his shoulder, his own shot going wide. Isaac spun at the sound, instantly locating both the threat and Lila on the ridge. Even at this distance, she could see the flash of his teeth as he grinned up at her, raising his hand in acknowledgement before turning back to the fight. It was time to go. Lila tucked the revolver away and urged the mare into motion, heading north toward the mission. Her last glimpse of the ranch showed Isaac advancing on the remaining outlaws, Frank limping from the barn to join him, rifle raised despite his injury. They would survive, Lila told herself as she rode. Isaac Holbrook was not a man who died easily. He would find them when it was over, just as he had promised. The mission came into view as the sun began to set a cluster of simple wooden buildings surrounding a small chapel, its cross gleaming gold in the fading light. As Lila approached, several women emerged from the main building, their faces concerned but welcoming. "Are you hurt, child?" asked the eldest, a nun with kind eyes and a weathered face. "No, sister," Lila replied, carefully dismounting with Emma still secured against her. "But we need sanctuary. Men are pursuing us." The nun nodded, requiring no further explanation. "Come inside. You'll be safe here." The following days passed in a blur of anxiety and waiting. The sisters were kind, providing Lila and Emma with a small room, clean clothes, and plenty of food. Emma thrived in the peaceful environment, untroubled by her mother's constant glances toward the road, her startled reactions to every approaching hoofbeat. No word came from Isaac or the ranch. Lila tried not to imagine the worst: the house burned to the ground, Isaac and his men lying dead among the ashes, Reeves and his gang continuing their reign of terror. She kept busy helping in the mission's kitchen and garden, grateful for tasks that occupied her hands if not her worried mind. On the 5th day, just as Lila was beginning to lose hope, a rider appeared on the road from the south. She was hanging laundry when Sister Agnes called to her, pointing toward the approaching horseman. Lila's heart leapt to her throat as she recognized the broad shoulders, the confident seat in the saddle. Isaac Holbrook rode slowly into the mission yard, his face bruised and a fresh bandage visible on his forearm, but very much alive. She didn't remember moving, but suddenly she was across the yard, Emma on her hip, standing before his horse as he dismounted stiffly. "You came," she said simply, searching his face for signs of more serious injury. "I promised I would," Isaac replied, his voice rough with exhaustion, but his eyes warming as they met hers. His gaze moved to Emma, who was studying him with solemn curiosity. "Hello, little one. Remember me?" To Lila's surprise, Emma reached out her arms toward Isaac, a rare gesture of trust for her normally reserved daughter. Isaac hesitated, then carefully took the baby, his large hands gentle as he settled her against his shoulder. "She remembers?" Lila said softly, watching as Emma patted Isaac's cheek with her tiny hand. "What happened?" "The ranch." "Half the house is gone," Isaac admitted, "but the barn and outbuildings survived. Frank's recovering at Doc Sullivan's in town. The Jenkins boys are already starting repairs. And Reeves, his men." A grim satisfaction crossed Isaac's features. "Reeves won't be troubling anyone else. 2 of his men are dead, 3 wounded, and in the marshal's custody. The last one ran probably halfway to Canada by now." "It's over then," Lila said, relief washing through her like a physical force. "It's over," Isaac confirmed. He studied her face for a long moment, seeming to search for words. "I've been thinking about what comes next, for you and Emma." Lila tensed, unsure what to expect. Would he suggest she move on, find another town, start fresh away from the memories of violence? "And I'd like you to come back to the ranch," Isaac said, his usual confidence giving way to an endearing uncertainty. "Not just temporarily. To stay." "Stay," Lila repeated, her heart beginning to race. "As what?" Isaac shifted Emma to his other arm, his free hand coming up to touch Lila's cheek in a mirror of their moment in the cellar. "That would be up to you," he said softly. "A housekeeper, if that's all you want. A partner in the ranch, if you're willing, or—" He trailed off, but his eyes said what his words didn't, that he was offering more than employment or partnership. He was offering a future. A chance for something neither of them had expected to find in the chaos of bullets and fire. "It's too soon," Lila said, though everything in her wanted to accept immediately. "Thomas has been gone barely a week." "I know," Isaac acknowledged, dropping his hand. "And I'm not asking for promises now. Just come back to the ranch. Help me rebuild. Give us time to see if this," he gestured between them, "is real or just born from danger and gratitude." It was a fair offer, sensible and respectful. But Lila had seen enough death to know the value of honesty. "I shot a man for you," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I've never done that for anyone, not even my husband. I think that tells me something about what I feel." A slow smile spread across Isaac's face, transforming his rugged features. "You're an extraordinary woman, Lila Vaughn. And you're the man who shot a rope and caught my baby in midair," she replied, returning his smile. "I think that deserves at least a chance to see where this leads." Isaac nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. Then you'll come back with me. Yes, Lila decided, we'll come home with you. Home. The word felt right, even for a place she had barely seen before it burned. Home wasn't the buildings or the land. It was the people who would rebuild together, who would face whatever came next, side by side. As they prepared to leave the mission the following morning, Sister Agnes pulled Lila aside. Are you certain about this, child? You barely know this man. Lila watched as Isaac gently settled Emma in a special carrier he had fashioned for the journey, his large hands careful with her tiny form. I know what matters, she said confidently. He risked his life for us when he could have ridden away. He's honorable, brave, and kind. The rest we'll learn together. The nun studied her face, then nodded slowly. Love born in fire can be the strongest kind, she said. God be with you all. The journey back to the ranch was taken at a leisurely pace, with frequent stops to tend to Emma and rest the horses. Isaac pointed out landmarks and boundaries of his property, sharing stories of how he had acquired each parcel of land, the challenges and triumphs of building the ranch from nothing. Lila found herself imagining a future here, Emma growing up strong and free in this wild, beautiful country, herself working alongside Isaac to create something lasting, perhaps even more children someday, brothers and sisters for Emma with Isaac's blue eyes and steady hands. When they crested the final hill and the ranch came into view, Lila was prepared for devastation. The reality was less grim than she had feared. Half the main house still stood, its walls blackened but structurally sound. The barn and bunkhouse were untouched, and scaffolding around the damaged section of the house showed that repairs were already well underway. Frank sent the boys to work as soon as he could issue orders from his sickbed, Isaac explained with a chuckle. Said he wasn't about to let me come home to a burned-out shell. Home, Lila repeated softly, testing the word again. It still feels strange to think of this as our home. Isaac looked at her, his expression serious beneath the brim of his hat. It won't always, he promised. Give it time. The Jenkins brothers and the remaining ranch hands emerged from the barn as they rode in, welcoming Isaac back with hearty shouts and Lila with respectful nods. News of her shooting one of the outlaws had apparently spread, earning her a measure of respect among these hard men of the frontier. Mrs. Vaughn will be staying with us, Isaac announced simply. She and her daughter are under my protection and part of this ranch now. I expect you all to treat them accordingly. The men exchanged knowing glances but nodded their agreement without comment. Lila felt herself blush under their appraising looks, aware that her presence would raise questions and possibly gossip. Yet Isaac's straightforward declaration left no room for disrespect or speculation. The standing portion of the house had been cleaned and prepared for their return. The kitchen was functional, a new stove installed to replace the one damaged in the fire. The main living area had been cleared of debris and smoke damage, fresh paint covering the worst of the scorch marks. Isaac's bedroom, now to be Lila and Emma's, he insisted, had been spared the flames entirely. You'll take my room, Isaac said firmly when Lila protested. I'll bunk with Frank in the foreman's cabin until we get the rest of the house rebuilt. That could be weeks, Lila argued. I can't put you out of your own home for so long. You're not putting me out, Isaac countered. I'm offering. There's a difference. Their first days settling into the ranch established a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Lila took over the cooking and household management, allowing Ellie, the part-time cook, to focus on caring for Frank as he recovered from his gunshot wound. Isaac and the men worked from dawn to dusk on rebuilding the damaged sections of the house, the sound of hammers and saws a constant backdrop to their days. Emma thrived in the ranch environment, fascinated by the horses and cattle, delighted by the attention from Isaac's men, who proved to be gentle giants around the baby. She began pulling herself up to stand, determined to be mobile. And Isaac built her a small corral of her own in the living room, a safe space where she could practice her new skills without encountering the many hazards of a working ranch. Evenings became Lila's favorite time. After Emma was asleep, she and Isaac would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in spectacular colors while they talked about their days, their pasts, their hopes for the future. They were careful never to rush, both aware of the newness of their connection and the importance of building it on solid ground. A month passed, then two. The house took shape again, larger and sturdier than before. Frank returned from town, his gruff manner softened somewhat by his brush with death. The threat of the Blackwell Gang faded from their daily thoughts, though Lila still sometimes woke in the night, heart racing from dreams of ropes and falling babies and gunfire. On those nights she would check on Emma, then step onto the porch for fresh air. Often she would find Isaac already there, unable to sleep for his own reasons. They never spoke much during these nocturnal encounters, but the silent companionship brought comfort to them both. It was during one such night, nearly 3 months after the attack, that something shifted between them. Emma had been particularly fussy, cutting a new tooth that left her irritable and wakeful. After finally getting her to sleep, Lila stepped outside to clear her head and found Isaac sitting on the porch steps, a cup of coffee in his hands despite the late hour. "Rough night?" he asked, offering her the cup. Lila accepted it gratefully, taking a sip before handing it back. Teething, the bane of mothers everywhere, Isaac chuckled softly. "She's growing so fast." "Too fast," Lila agreed, settling beside him on the step. "She'll be walking before we know it, and then running and riding and breaking hearts all over Montana territory," Isaac predicted with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Just like her mother," Lila teased, then immediately regretted it when Isaac's expression turned serious. "Exactly like her mother," he said quietly, his gaze steady on her face. The air between them seemed to charge with electricity, 3 months of careful friendship suddenly illuminated by the possibility of more. Lila found herself unable to look away from his eyes, dark blue in the moonlight and filled with an emotion she had been too afraid to name until now. "Isaac," she began, unsure what she wanted to say, but knowing something needed to be said. He set the coffee cup aside, turning to face her more fully. "I've been patient, Lila. I promised you time and I meant it, but I think we both know what's happening here." Lila nodded slowly. "I know. The question is whether you're ready for it," Isaac continued. "It's been less than 4 months since Thomas died. If you need more time—" "I don't," Lila interrupted, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Thomas and I had a marriage of convenience more than passion. We were friends who thought we could build a good life together. I mourned him, and I always will honor his memory as Emma's father. But what I feel for you—" She trailed off, the intensity of her emotions making words seem inadequate. "What do you feel?" Isaac pressed gently, his hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Everything," Lila whispered. "Fear and hope and gratitude and desire and—" she took a deep breath. "And love." I love you, Isaac Holbrook. I think I started falling the moment you caught my daughter in midair. The smile that spread across Isaac's face was like sunrise, breaking over the mountains. I love you too, Lila Vaughn, have since you picked up that revolver and saved my life from the ridge. His hand cupped her cheek, warm and calloused against her skin. May I kiss you now? I've been wanting to since that day in the cellar. In answer, Lila leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers gently at first, then with growing intensity as months of restrained emotion found release. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer until she was practically in his lap, her hands tangled in his hair. When they finally parted, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said simply. Be my wife. Let me be a father to Emma. Build this life with me properly. Yes, Lila answered without hesitation. Yes to all of it. They were married 2 weeks later in the newly rebuilt parlor of the ranch house, with Frank standing as Isaac's best man and sister Agnes making the journey from the mission to support Lila. Emma, dressed in a tiny white dress sewn by the sisters, watched the proceedings with solemn curiosity from Frank's arms. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, the small gathering of ranch hands and neighbors bearing witness to vows that had already been proven through fire and danger. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac's kiss held both promise and fulfillment, the sealing of a bond forged in the most unexpected circumstances. That night, after the guests had departed and Emma was asleep in her new nursery adjoining their bedroom, Isaac and Lila stood together on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. Happy, Mrs. Holbrook? Isaac asked, his arm warm around her waist. Happier than I ever imagined possible, Lila replied honestly, leaning into his embrace. If someone had told me 6 months ago that I would lose everything only to find something far more precious, I wouldn't have believed them. Life has a way of surprising us, Isaac agreed. When I rode toward those gunshots that day, I was just doing what anyone would do. I never expected to find my future. Our future, Lila corrected, turning in his arms to face him. Yours, mine, and Emma's. And perhaps others someday, Isaac suggested, his hand resting briefly on her stomach in a question. Lila smiled, covering his hand with her own. Someday soon, I hope. Emma should have brothers and sisters to grow up with. Isaac's kiss was tender, full of the love and promise that had brought them to this moment. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the night sky, not an omen or a portent, but simply a beautiful thing witnessed together, one of countless moments that would make up the tapestry of their shared life. In the years that followed, the legend of the cowboy who shot the rope and caught the baby midair became something of a local tale, growing more elaborate with each retelling in saloons and around campfires. But for the Holbrook family, Isaac and Lila, Emma and the 3 brothers and sister who eventually joined her, it remained simply the beginning of their story, the moment when danger and courage brought together 2 hearts destined to find each other on the wild Montana frontier. As their family grew and the ranch prospered, Lila sometimes marveled at how a single moment of terrible danger had led to such abundant joy. She would watch Isaac teaching their children to ride, his patience and strength evident in every careful instruction, and remember the precise instant when she had seen him race across the prairie, determined to save a child he didn't know. That same determination now showed in everything he did, building their ranch into one of the most successful in the territory, defending their land and family against the challenges of frontier life, loving Lila with a steadfast devotion that deepened with each passing year. And on quiet evenings, When the children were asleep and they sat together on the porch of the home they had rebuilt together, Lila would sometimes whisper, "Tell me again how you caught her," just to see the modest shrug and hear him say, "I was just in the right place at the right time," to which she would always reply, "We both were," and kiss him beneath the endless Montana stars, grateful beyond words for the man who had shot the rope and caught not only her falling child, but her heart as well.